In this section, we will discuss our evolving atmosphere. Scientists believe that the early atmosphere of the Earth contained a great deal of carbon dioxide, CO2 gas. However, the Earth's atmosphere today has around 0.04% of this gas. And the question is, where has it all gone? The answer is that carbon dioxide is gone into living organisms and into materials formed from living organisms. So let's describe now how carbon locked into rock. In photosynthesis, green plants will take carbon dioxide and water to convert them to glucose and oxygen gas. Glucose contains carbon, and the carbon in the glucose can then end up in a new plant material. Many of the animals will feed on these plants, so when animals eat the plants, some of this carbon can be transferred to the animal tissues, including their skeletons and shells. So the plants will take carbon dioxide and water to convert it to glucose and oxygen. Glucose contains carbon. So now plants contain carbon. Animals will feed on some of these plants, so now the tissues, skeletons, and shells of the animals contain carbon. Over millions of years, the skeletons and shells of huge numbers of these marine organisms built up at the bottom of oceans. So when these marine organisms died, their skeletons and shells built up at the bottom of the ocean. Then they became covered with a layer upon layer of fine sediment. With the pressure caused by being buried by all these layers of sediment, eventually the deposits formed sedimentary carbonate rocks such as limestone. Limestone is a rock containing mainly calcium carbonate, CaCO3. So over millions of years, the marine organisms died, however, their skeletons and shells built up at the bottom of vast oceans, and they were covered with fine sediment. The layers of sediment caused the pressure, and then the deposits formed sedimentary carbonate rocks such as limestone, which contains mainly calcium carbonate. Moreover, some of the remains of ancient living things, whether they are animals or plants, were crushed by large-scale movements of the Earth, and they were heated within the Earth's crust over very long periods of time. So they formed the fossil fuels coal, crude oil, and natural gas. Coal is classified as a sedimentary rock, and it was formed from thick deposits of plant material such as ancient trees. When the plants died in swamps, they were buried in the absence of oxygen and compressed over millions of years. On the other hand, the crude oil and natural gas were formed from the remains of plankton deposits and moths on the seabed. These remains were covered by sediments that became layers of rock when compressed over millions of years. The crude oil and natural gas formed is found trapped beneath these layers of rock. So we have coal and we have crude oil and natural gas. In this way, much of the carbon from the old carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere became locked up within the Earth's crust in rocks and in fossil fuels. In addition to that, carbon dioxide gas was also removed from the early atmosphere because it dissolved in the water of the oceans. Over the past 200 million years, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere didn't change much, and this is due to the natural cycle of carbon in which carbon moves between the oceans, rocks, and the atmosphere.